Good afternoon, distinguished guests and speakers. My name is Tessa, and I'm from the Centre for Liveable Cities. The centre was jointly established by the Ministry of National Development and the Ministry of Environment and Water Resources in 2008 to distill, create, and share knowledge on livable and sustainable cities. The CLC lecture series is one of the platforms through which urban thought leaders share best practices and exchange ideas and experiences. Today, we are honored to have three speakers who will shed some light on the topic of circular cities, as well as a moderator who will conduct the Q&A session. Our first speaker, Kees Slingerland. He is the Business Director of the Amsterdam Institute for Advanced Metropolitan Solutions. He was also the former Director General of the Environmental Sciences Group at Wageningen University and Research. He worked as an advisor for the Dutch Ministry of Agriculture, Nature and Food Quality, as well as project manager for NEHAM International. He was also the former managing director of Arcadis Netherlands. Our second speaker, Bob Geldermans. He is the program manager of Amsterdam Institute for Advanced Metropolitan Solutions. He leads the Circular City Research Program at AMS and is a researcher at the Delft University of Technology. He also does freelance consulting for Accept Integrated Sustainability in Rotterdam and the Ministry of Economic Affairs. Our last speaker, Dr. Mien. She is the head of sustainability of IKEA Southeast Asia, Ikano Private Limited, Singapore. She set up the Sustainable Manufacturing Center as a research scientist with the Singapore Institute of Manufacturing Technology at A*STAR. She is also trained in circular economy and has been active in the environmental scene in Singapore and is currently a member of the NEA Singapore Packaging Agreement Governing Board and the PUB Water Panel. The format for today's lecture will start off with a presentation by each panelist, followed by a Q&A session with the audience. The session will be moderated by Ms. Jessica Cheam, Managing Editor of Ecobusiness and CLC Adjunct Research Associate. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Kees.
Ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon. Bob and me are very happy that we are in Singapore today and tomorrow only to collect a lot of information on also looking at possible future collaboration with Singapore from our Amsterdam Institute. And this is a bit new because the whole institute is quite new, or let me say quite young. It is a top scientific institute that is even not 3 years old at the moment. That was initiated by the city of Amsterdam because they wanted more scientists in the city in the field of technology, and not only for science reasons, but also because they expect us to initiate a lot of business in the city of Amsterdam. And that is the background why they have invited a group of top universities to settle this institute, and these universities are the University of Technology in Delft in the Netherlands, the Green University in Wageningen in the Netherlands, and MIT from Boston, that you will probably know. So we have to deliver science and we have to deliver business. And it should be about technology, and it is focusing at metropolitan solutions. And this is not so crazy because all of us know that the world is having quite a challenge in the coming decades in the whole urbanization that takes place worldwide. The picture you see shows the cities having more than 5 million residents in the year 1950, and this is how it looks now. And it is very easy to conclude that we have more big cities in the world, and we do know that that will be even more in the coming decades, knowing that now it is 3.5 billion people living in cities, and in 20, 30 years from now it will be 7 billion. So in that sense, it will keep growing. But the other conclusion you can draw from these two sheets is that these cities are developing in the delta regions in the world. And this makes it even more interesting or more exciting. Because the deltas in the world are the vulnerable areas in the world. Vulnerable for many issues, vulnerable for climate change especially, And it are the regions that we have to take care of very precisely, because in the deltas in the world, we produce the total food production for the human population. And the deltas in the world are also the very rich nature regions where biodiversity is at its richest. So we have to take care of these regions. And we have especially chosen these regions for very clear reasons, by the way, to build our very big cities. So we will even put more pressure on these very fragile areas that we have worldwide. Fragile for many reasons and for many causes, but let me keep it simple to look on a day like today. We had some rain in Singapore, to look at rainfall as the issue. And I think this picture shows that it's clear to anybody of us that rainfall in the countryside area is much more easier absorbed than it is in urban areas. So the whole discharge of heavy rainfall in urban areas, it's much more difficult than taking that in a countryside area, in the rural area. So cities have to take care and to take measurements, not only because rainfall is rainfall as it is, but the more so because rainfall will change in the decades to come and already changed in the past decades as a result of climate change. I think you experience what we experience in Amsterdam as well, that rainfall is getting much more intense and that rain showers are much more heavy and much more local. So rainfall patterns are really changing significantly. And the big question, by the way, is how this will be in the long run, because if you look at the several climate models that we have, then it is quite typical to see that it is expected, according to these models, that in some regions in the world, rainfall will even get more heavy and more intensive, but also in some regions, they will be more dry. Especially a country like Bangladesh, which is known as the most wet country in the world, turns out, from these models at least, to get problems with drought in a few decades from now, 30, 40 years, for several reasons, but one of the causes is the melting of the glaciers that at a certain moment will end and will not result in more river flows through that small country of Bangladesh. So, yes, on the one hand, we should count on heavier rain, more intensive rain, but in the long run, you never know what will happen. You only know that there is quite some pressure on deltas, that there is quite some pressure on cities in the world, and that is why we really have to take care in the measurements, in the investments that we take in cities. Amsterdam has presented itself as a city that has offered itself as a living lab, which is very nice of the city of Amsterdam, the more so because Amsterdam probably is not a very big city, but it is a city that is very compact and that is very well suited to have experiments about rainfall, about discharge, but about many other topics that we can study on. Which is, yes, I mentioned rainfall, which is the whole issue of waste management, which is transport issues, bicycle issues. On our first day in Singapore, we already had a deep discussion about the desirableness of having more bikes in Singapore. Leave it for now. It is not about sailing, but about crowd management. That is quite an issue in our institute. It is about a new fleet of self-navigating boats that we will introduce in the waterways in Amsterdam. And it is about feeding the city. Big cities in the world need everyday fresh food, which is not easy to arrange, not in Amsterdam, and for sure not in cities with different climates than we have. So, ladies and gentlemen, we know that we will get many more and much bigger cities all over the world. We know that they will suffer from many topics and that we have to try to solve all the challenges we have in air pollution, in traffic jams, in energy supply, in waste management, in microclimate, in heat stress, in whatever kind of topic you would like to think of. And the approach that we have chosen is that a city is a metabolism, that a city should not be taken care of in a traffic problem being answered with traffic know-how, or an energy problem being answered with energy know-how. No, a city is an integrated part of many aspects that all interfere in one way or another. And we think that this integrated issue in a city should be answered with an integrated approach. And in order to better understand the interferences between several aspects in the city, we can use big data at least to understand a little of that and try on the basis of conclusions that we draw to make the proper decisions in how cities should further develop and what kind of investments we have to take. That is what Bob and me are doing these days. Check and see to what extent Singapore could be an option of a twin city that we could further collaborate with, as we have several other twin cities in the world, not too many by the way, because we would like to keep it manageable. And by looking from Amsterdam at least, it looked as if circularity, circular city, would be the topic that could give very good opportunities to work together with the Singaporeese people and the Singaporeese institutes and businesses. And therefore, that is a little bit the main topic that we have chosen for these days. We hope we can present a little bit about our insights in that sphere, but we hope the more that in the discussion you will also give your view on how Singapore is dealing with circularity and what type of future topics you distinguish that we could probably together work on. Thank you very much. For now.
Well, also from my side, it's great to be here and welcome to you all. Nice to see so many people. We dived into the Singapore context a little bit today, and that was a great start of our only 2-day experience for Singapore. Tomorrow is another packed day, and I'm looking forward to that. But first now, I will pick it up from where Kees left it, and that is going a little bit deeper into the Circular City Research Program at AMS, which I coordinate. But before I do that, I want to show this picture and go back to Kees's story about water and water stress and water problems, particularly this one. This could either be an image of the Netherlands a very long time ago. That's what it looked like. Or it could be the image of the Netherlands when we lose the battle against the water. So this is basically the Netherlands relative to the sea level. And there's Amsterdam. So you see what's left of Amsterdam, a floating city. Okay, so circular cities. Our subtitle was Improving Livability and Economic Climate in Amsterdam. And I'll go into that a little bit deeper. It's indeed the combination of the two, the livability. It has to be a vibrant and healthy city for its people. And there has to be a certain economic quality. And these two together bring many challenges and many options, how to keep them in balance. That is something that we'll see within the circular city debate as well. Now, my lecture will be structured around these topics. First, I'll talk a little bit about AMS, which Kees already did, but I want to stress a couple of other things that kind of bring me to the content of this lecture. And that is about cities, circularity. I want to talk about value and how we have to rethink the concept of value. Then I want to take you with me into a couple of projects of AMS. And finally, talk about some opportunities and challenges. Okay, AMS, Amsterdam Institute for Advanced Metropolitan Solutions. It was initiated on instigation of the Amsterdam municipality a couple of years ago. And what is important about this and what I want to stress is the position that AMS takes within the quadruple helix, as we call it. So we have the governmental organizations, we have the industry, we have the academia and knowledge institutes, and we have the citizens, or the end users, if you wish. And in the middle of that, AMS positions itself. So that says something about how we want to be and need to be trans and interdisciplinary and bridge sectors. And that will come back further within the presentation as well. Here you see a couple of partners or potential partners listed. This is an old diagram. There's new partners, some partners have left, but it indicates how much it is a collaborative approach that we adhere to at AMS. We need to do what we do with the industrial partners, with the governments, and the governments, I mean not only Amsterdam city, but also the other municipalities in the Amsterdam metropolitan area. And of course, with the other knowledge institutes in the area and the citizens, not least, because in the end, we do it for citizens. There's three main pillars, if you wish, within AMS. There's an education pillar. There is a data platform or a value platform where all the data that we collect and disclose and process will be gathered and shared with as many people as possible. That is a data set that will fill quite substantially over the course of the coming years. And it will be informed and it will be fed by both education and research and valorization. That's the third pillar. And research and valorization, that's where the three themes take place. So we have the theme of circular city, that is my program. Then we have vital city, which is very much about health and food issues. So very closely related to topics that I deal with within my program of Circular City, and Connected City. Connected City is very much about mobility, about ICT, big data, etc. And also there you can see the clear connections with the Circular City realm. But we'll go into that later. Okay, cities. What are we talking about when we talk about cities? From our perspective, we think of cities as concentrated hubs of essential flows. And flows are people, of course, information, currency, water, materials, energy, food, waste, you name it. Many of them were already mentioned in Kees' presentation, in particular the last slide. And offer scale level potential to close and connect loops. So that's another very important issue in ways that justify associated investments. So there you see the balance that has to be found within the urban context between the resource systems, between the closed loops, and between the investments that are being done because people believe in it. And that is something that we will come back to again a couple of times within this presentation, because it's all about how can we mobilize people to start to take part in this exciting challenge and adventure. Now, another thing I want to mention here is that cities have the capability of providing something for everybody, only because and only when they are created by everybody. So this says something about what I earlier stressed. It's the importance of the social fundament that is the city. The famous Jane Jacobs said that. Okay, the Amsterdam metropolitan area as a testbed. So here you see the Amsterdam metropolitan area, and in the left corner you see the Netherlands. So that gives you an idea where it takes place, and it's about roughly about 3 million people, I'd say, that live in that area. We could boil down our task or our objective into this question. How can the living and working quality in the Amsterdam metropolitan area be improved through innovative, renewable and robust resource systems? And I like to add there, whilst bringing innovations to scale. Because what we're doing in Amsterdam is not only for Amsterdam or done by Amsterdam people. It is mainly done because we're looking at ways to scale it up and to learn lessons that we can bring to other places, other territories, maybe Singapore. And the other way around, lessons from Singapore could land in a context like Amsterdam. Now, What is important, I already stated that AMS was initiated by the municipality of Amsterdam. The municipality of Amsterdam is quite proactive when it comes to circular economy. A couple of years ago, they saw the light and they thought, okay, if we have to proceed, if we have to go on, and we have to provide a vibrant, thriving city for our population, we need to do something about other resources that we need. We need to do something about air pollution. We need to do something about congestion. And all those metropolitan or big city issues are at stake. They realized, as Kees already mentioned, that they could do with some extra, let's say, engineering power or scientific power in the city that could help bridging the step from science, often conceptual, often abstract, into implementation, into business. Okay, here you see two examples. The Circular Amsterdam, which was a roadmap for the municipality of Amsterdam, in which they did a scan, a circular scan, to see, okay, where do we stand? What are the potential or the high potential flows that we can look at? And they came up with two high potential flows in particular. I'll show them later. The next one is the Circular Innovation Program, which basically is a spin-off of that Circular Amsterdam, because they realized there is so much potential. There's so much potential in terms of return on investments, in terms of job creation. None of that is sure, and the metrics are still a little bit wonky, and that's what we have to work on. That's where research comes in, but they believe in it. So the Circular Innovation Program that was set up in order to bring this a step further in close collaboration with AMS. Now, here you have two maps. This is the circular construction map. This is all about construction and demolition waste, one of the two focus flows of Amsterdam at the time. And you see how it's nicely located in the Amsterdam region. And that is something that I'll come back to later as well. But they made a very interesting visualization and graphics of how that could look like. And you have different chains within that network of processing flows, processing, construction, demolition flows. This is the other one, food. Food waste and organic waste in general, but food waste in particular, is something that is a high potential and high urgency flow for the city of Amsterdam and the Amsterdam region. Now, the step to rethink value is easily made because 2016 there was a report by Ellen MacArthur Foundation. You probably know the name Ellen MacArthur. The foundation was after Cradle to Cradle, Brown, and McDonough. Ellen MacArthur Foundation came up with significant documents and significant reports and studies in order to put this on track, this whole adventure. And they didn't do that in a very flimsy, simple way. They wanted to do it substantially. So they actually said, we can do this, and we're gonna help you, we're gonna guide you. So that's what happened. And in 2016, they published a very interesting report, which was about unlocking the circular economy potential. It's very interesting, and I advise you to have a look at it. It's freely downloadable from the internet. And it's so interesting because it really tweaks our perspective on how we think about value. What is value now? This morning we had very interesting conversations about money flows and about business models and about investment power and risk aversion and stuff like that. And all these aspects are super important and are the fundamentals behind our current linear economy. Now, it's very tricky to start warping them. So how do we go about it? Because we do realize that in a circular model, things change significantly. Now, what they do in this report is give a couple of examples, give a couple of models in which that could work and lead the way and be like a lighthouse in terms of, okay, we can go in this direction not as a norm, but as a way of moving forward and explore and fail and explore again. Here is the famous butterfly diagram. I hope that all of you know it, so I'm not going to explain it in great detail, but I will do a little bit to help and contribute to my successor. You see on the left-hand side the biological cycle, and on the right-hand side the technological cycle. And these two are distinguished from each other. And that is not done for nothing. That is done because there's a very clear reason for it. If you mingle them, it's very hard to then retrieve them in a high utility or in a high quality. So different rules are valid for the biological cycles. You sooner speak about cascades than about closing loops. And cascades is basically bringing it back at the very end into nature again in order to be a nutrient for the earth. So that is indeed a closed loop. But that goes via different cascading, so lower grade utilities of the same flows. On the right-hand side, it's slightly different. You have technical flows, and these technical flows should not end up in nature. So they have to be dealt with in a technical model, in a technical context. And you can divide that, you can distinguish various steps of, let's say, complexity, from easy maintenance and repair towards much more difficult remanufacturing, for instance, or recycling. And that is then one of the most labor-intensive and complex processes. It also takes the most money, and it takes usually the most energy in order to bring that about. So there is a certain hierarchy in that model, starting from where can we maintain and keep it as long in its function as possible, then what can we repair, etc. Clear to understand. Now, Rethink Value is also about what do we have? And this is something that we don't realize often enough, I think. Singapore, just as the Netherlands, doesn't have a lot of resources itself. So it's very much dependent on other countries. And these countries are quite often far away. And these countries are quite often countries that we don't have a lot of control over. And these countries are also quite a lot of the times politically sensitive. So there's quite a lot of risks there. So if you talk about resource scarcity, or rather supply security, then you have to do something more radical. You have to think about the future. Where do we find these materials? Now, the good news is that they circulate to a large extent within our current economy. But how do we retrieve them? So that is something that is that requires a lot of research, and it's something that will take generations. But we can already make steps, we already take steps, and in the Netherlands the recycling rates are quite high. There the question is that actually recycling in the highest utility possible, or is it a downgrading type of recycling? So that is, these are issues that we deal with. And these are issues that are dealt with in the European Union and in general, and the Netherlands in particular. Because the Netherlands has one of the highest recycling rates, together with Belgium, and Germany follows quite shortly after it. But what does that say? That means that other countries look at the Netherlands and say, well, the Netherlands has high recycling rates and high energy recovery rates. How do they do that? We have to follow their example. And I would love to say, yes, do it. We can tell you everything we do. But I'm not going to do that, because a lot of it is downcycling, as we call it, not in the highest utility possible. Or we even burn, we even incinerate valuable resources, which we call waste, which is basically a design failure. So that is something that we are now looking into. How can we change that? And how can other countries leapfrog and make sure that they don't lock themselves into waste incinerators that will last for 30 years? Another two examples I would like to show when we think about value and rethinking about value is the current focus, and then I talk about the Netherlands, but I see this elsewhere in the world as well. There's a huge focus on energy transition. We have to move to renewable energy. And that's great, that's true, renewable energy technologies. And here you see a nice diagram that kind of shows that indeed the kilogram CO2 per kilowatt hour is much less when we move to the right of the diagram and we see the renewable energy technologies. And on the left, you see more the fossil alternatives, because there should be alternatives in the future. Okay, now if we take another stance at it, and we look at from another perspective, and we look at materials, that paints a totally different picture. Here, it's about gram of metals per kilowatt hour. And here you see, actually, that quite a lot of the renewable energy technologies have a much higher material intensity than the fossil counterparts. So that is very interesting. And the moment that energy issues are solved, these material issues become more and more important. And these link to my question earlier about where are these resources? Okay, now I want to go through a couple of AMS projects to see how are we dealing with that and how are we addressing that. Urban Pulse was already mentioned by Kees, and I will give a short insight later. 3D printing in the Circular City is a lovely but quite small project that's all about using waste plastics and making that into a filament for additive manufacturing. And the proof of concept was a public bench that they created with this, within this project. And that is something that the municipality of Amsterdam really liked, appreciated, and they ordered a couple of those benches. So that's a nice kind of symbolic gesture, but it's more about the study behind it. So can we actually turn plastics, use plastics, into a valuable resource for 3D printing, knowing that 3D printing is a very important future technology. Already now, but it will be even more so in the future. Repair, that stands for resource management in peri-urban areas. I will dedicate one slide to that later. The feeding city was already mentioned by Kees, so I won't go into too deep, otherwise I'll go over time. Smart systems, ethical concerns, yeah, very much about smart energy systems and what does that mean for the data that we need, and what does that mean for ethical concerns in terms of who knows about those data, who can have access to those data. Urban retrofitting, very important for Amsterdam. I think the same for Singapore, but in a different kind of context. Amsterdam, of course, is an old city. It has a lot of renovation and transformation challenges. Puma and circular components in the built environment. Now, you can read more about those projects on the website. Prospecting the urban mind of Amsterdam, that's Puma. What they did within this project was looking to Amsterdam and basically the Netherlands as a whole, because the algorithms that they used were valid for the whole of the Netherlands, of the metal content, in particular steel and copper, in the built stock, in the built environments. And so they can give a certain bandwidth of what is in the current built environment in terms of these two metals, and an indication of when will it become available. Now, this is very rough information because we cannot predict really when it becomes available and what quality it becomes available. But it is a start to provide data, to generate data with which we can then go a step further. Now, Urban Pulse was already mentioned. I want to show you this diagram, which is really nice, I think, simple. But you see on the right-hand side, the red oval with the 4 in. That is the data that is currently available with regards to energy when we talk about smart grid. So that is on the municipality, on the district, on the neighborhood level, even on the street level, but also, but always, per year. Now, what do we want to know in order to make a really smart grid? We want to know metropolitan region data. We want to know district and neighborhood data per day, per minute, per second. You know? So there you can see the gap between the data that are currently available and the data level that we need. Now, resource management in peri-urban areas, repair. Here it says what it is. It's a bit abstract. It's basically a decision-making tool. But what it wants to do is take the perspective of waste as a resource. How can we come up with waste issues that currently play and change that into something more innovative, either by eliminating the waste flow altogether or finding interesting end-of-life solutions or change the design upstream. Now, what we realized is that we can start from waste and come up with interesting end-of-life scenarios. And what you then do is basically you optimize the system. That is far from what we want to reach. What we want to reach is look at the whole system, because the system in itself doesn't have a beginning and an end. What you see here is we wanted to make an activity and spatial-based material flow analysis of the whole system. So in this case, it's about glass bottles. Because we had a lot of data for that, we could make a quick example. And it shows where the production and consumption system around these bottles materializes. And if you want to see the transport lines, this is what it looks like. And you know quite a lot if you know that. You know where the different processes take place within that whole system around wasting of glass bottles. Not only at household level, but also at manufacturing level, for instance, or during transport. Now, this is something that's work in progress. Repair continues for another 3 years. But this is basically the flow that we follow. Coming to the last slides, we are dealing with complex integrated systems, and that is in itself a complex term, but it's very hard to understand what it is, because it's not the way in which we usually think. And this goes to show how that kind of manifests itself. We talked about e-waste earlier today. Well, it's quite often out of sight, and we externalize this. We talk about business models, for instance, in the circular economy debate. How can we, on a component level, reuse certain materials? Well, it's all very interesting, but we have to look again at the whole system. What happens? Where's the leakage? And this is a graph, a diagram of shipment, transboundary shipment of electronic waste over the globe. And you see what activity takes place there, and that's a huge economy. This is the reality we're dealing with. And that's not something that we have to shy away from. We just have to accept the fact that that's true. How are we going to include that and internalize that? Complex integrated systems. Here, a small example of Buiksloterham, which is an area in Amsterdam that was studied and scrutinized extensively. Here you see several flows. It's a material flow analysis, and you see the flows coming in. I'm not going into detail. What I want to show you here on the right-hand side is that there's incineration taking place, a lot of incineration of organic waste, for instance. And that incinerator that provides heat, that heat doesn't go to that particular area, it goes to the rest of Amsterdam more so. But this is a painful point, and this is a weak spot if you talk about circularity, because resources and potentially high-value resources are incinerated here, still now. And we're doing a lot in the Netherlands in order to post-separate and pre-separate and make sure that behavioral changes take place, but still a lot of the resources end up in the incinerator. Last slide is about scales. I already mentioned it with regards to the construction demolition waste map of Amsterdam. How are we going to close loops? Where do we do that? Do we do that on the scale of a building? And if so, do we know what the supply and demand patterns are? Do we need the neighborhood in order to attune the closing of loops or connecting of loops? Do we have to look even further into the city or the whole region? Where can we best connect loops? Maybe it's Europe. It's quite likely that for some materials it's Europe. And as we just seen, it's the world for some materials. So we have to take really good account of on which scale level and on which temporal scale these loops move. It's complex and it's dynamic. Final slide, opportunities and great research potential, because opportunities and challenges, yes. But this also means fantastic research potential for us at AMS, also for Singapore. And together we can get much further. We can learn from each other, and we can see where we can put our own accents. I will not read them all out. You can read them for yourself. I only want to read out the last one, because that sums it up, really. Yeah? And it also sums up where I started with. The need for new regenerative value models requires new thinking. Now, what does that entail, new thinking? It means thinking out of the box. It means radical system change. Now, and this is, I think, the main challenge that we're facing. Who is going to change what? Who is going to change where? It's going to be a shared effort. We have to drive each other, and we have to do that in a shared effort. And that can only be done if we do that radically and not trying to optimize the current linear system, because then we will not end in the circular model that we try to achieve. So I'll leave you with this one and my email address if you have any further questions, but I'm sure we're going to talk about a couple of those issues later. Yeah, sorry that I took a bit longer. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm happy to be here to be sharing about some of the what does a retailer in IKEA see when it comes to circular economy. I thank you, CLC, for the invitation. Honestly, when I first received the invitation, I had a bit of a struggle to decide how should the presentation be, because they came and said, could you share a bit on circular economy? And then I look at the topic, circular city. IKEA, circular city, it's a bit difficult to immediately have a connection. But after looking through at what AMS is doing, I thought they've set the stage really well for circular economy. Bob has fantastically explained why do we need to move towards a circular economy. And then what I can do here is really to bring you a concrete example of how a company, a commercial company like IKEA, it's convinced that we should move towards the circular economy, and at the same time, it is something that we believe would keep our business going. It's not anything that we're doing because we need to save the environment only. It's really something that we believe it's the way to go as a responsible business. As we grow our business, there's really a need for us to move towards circular economy so as to meet the many demands of our customers. Hence, today I'll share a little bit about how do a retailer like us see. What is circular economy to us? It's essentially about how do we meet the demands of the many people. We've learned that there are going to be a lot more mega cities. There are going to be a lot more people living in the city, smaller space. They would have home furnishing needs. And that's where home furnishing business, we need to really cater to all this. So it's really about reaching the many with smart use of material. And how do we do that? We need to say, and we need to see that it's about prolonging life of the products and material. I know IKEA has the reputation of buy and throw away, right? In my position, for many years, I've been asked this question many times, but I can tell you for sure that we have relooked into the entire business model and entire resource chains that we have, and we believe that a circular IKEA is definitely the way that we need to go. But how do we do that? We are also not doing it just because we think it is the way. We've gone out to do research, we've gone out to talk to the many people that we served, and we realized that people do see values in things. People are concerned about the amount of stuff that they throw away. At least I myself feel guilty about throwing good stuff away. I'm sure many of you does, right? And also people do have problems at life at home and they need help. With smaller space, with you want a good quality of life, everything comes in. So that's essentially why we are very, very convinced. Again, the very famous butterfly diagram. We are also part of the C100 of Allen and MacArthur. So we've taken the butterfly diagram and we've adapted to how we see IKEA could be looking at when it comes to having like a repair, secondhand, refurbish or remanufacturing, recycle, as well as with the other renewable energy that we have. With that, We know that in order to have a circular IKEA, these are the three big areas where we would definitely have to change the way we're doing. Instead of a linear economy that you see today, it's the circular IKEA that we would like to see in the future. And we're starting to move towards that area. So first of all, from a product design perspective, we really need to look at how do we design for circularity. Today, some of the products, if during the product design, we don't really think about what's going to happen at the end of life, then it's also quite difficult to have a solution at the end of life because it doesn't match when it, but if we, from the start, design circularity, whether to look at whether the materials are reusable or recyclable or not, modular design, IKEA has gone into quite a lot of modular design where you could just change some parts of the whole furniture and you get a new furniture, or at least you get a refreshed furniture without the need to throw away the entire bed. And then when it comes to the way we interact with our consumer, today we are quite a linear economy again. It's one transaction. You come to the store, you buy stuff, you go out. When you don't want the stuff again, either you throw away, you try to sell it on its own. But what about if IKEA could think about having things like rent and share? What about if we can really put IKEA furniture on the rental, where you only need it for a few days, you bring it back, and then we can, again, it's a bit of sharing economy, where you have furniture that's shared by many people. What about taking back and resell? I'm sure every one of us is guilty about having a very nice couch, but at the same time you want another couch. Whether it's a new season, or whether there's a need for you to upsize or downsize your couch. That's always an issue that we all faced. So what about if IKEA could actually buy back your really good furniture and resell it back in some part of the stores or on the web for other people who might need it? As well as there's some stuff that is really valuable and you don't want to throw away even though you know it's not working that well. You want to repair or you want it to be working again. So those are the bit where when we look at how we do business today, we have to think about. And then the last bit is, I would say one of the more difficult bit is the resource chain. We talk about, it's easy in forward logistic. It's always make, manufacture, deliver, distribute. But what about coming back? It's this resource chain that is always giving us the problem. How do we collect back? How do we expect individual consumer like yourself, to bring back a big sofa to IKEA or bring back a big table to IKEA? So those are the very bits where we really need to think about and how can we effect that. It's not easy, at least we're committed to do it. So I just want to give you some example. We're not entirely into circular IKEA yet, but at the same time, we've actually started something. If you look at what we're doing currently, is we do have products and spare parts in the store that you can pick it up, so that you can do minor repairs to avoid throwing away a product which is only slightly damaged. Within our own operations, we do repackage some of the products that's broken so that it can again be resold in order to avoid waste. We've also, in the Assist Corner, really have secondhand sales as well as some slightly damaged products, where we sold them at a discounted price. And then in our own store, we definitely handle our waste in a sustainable way, and we have our recycling target, which is set really high year on year. But that's not enough. I think there's a lot more that we really have to bring on. What about really after sale, like a second-hand sale? What about repairing, working with some social enterprise to provide repair services? What about remanufacturing? Remanufacturing some of the products, because one IKEA product, you might have, it's always self-assembled, right? You have different components. Sometimes it's just one component that's spoiled. What about disassembling the entire products and then re-put back into a good product? You've seen that there's a lot of people online out there who tries to customize their own IKEA product. We've also seen some of the countries that has already gone into leasing IKEA products. So those are the bits that we're developing as we go along. Coming a bit nearer to home, we've not done a big project, but within our own operations, what we have tried to do is when we look at our waste flow, when we look at the different kind of waste that we generate from the store, we try to see what else can we create a closed loop. How can we reuse back our waste? So one of the things we tried was with the cooking oil, the used cooking oil that we used, we've worked with Alpha Biodiesel and convert them into biodiesel, which we pump it back to the delivery trucks that we have. So it's a way of consuming back our own waste. The other one, it's really, again, our own facade banner. We have a lot of facade banner every year because we change as the season, as the campaign goes. So we used to work with WeWorks to make them into stuff like a little orange bag, which we give it out to our co-workers. So again, it's a good way to look at our own waste and create them into new products so that we could avoid using more virgin products. Then moving on, that's of course not enough for us. We really need to look into how much more can we do as a business in Singapore. And then I'm happy to say that in July, we're also trying to pilot an activity to really start looking at take-back, furniture take-back. So as a responsible retailer, I think it's only right that we provide customer with a good way to handle the products that they've bought from us. So it's a way of us working towards circular economy. And then I also want to share a little bit about, this is more local what we're doing, but this is what we have managed to do in the last 2 or 3 years on a global level. From Bob's last slide, you see that it's different circular scale. You need to look at the scale and look at where should the circular happen. And I think when it comes to some of the product, we realize that it has to happen on a bigger scale, on a regional scale, where we collect back the material on a regional scale and pump it back into global product development. So what we have done, it's we've collected some plastics from the stores in Shanghai, and then make them into a spray bottle. That's a typo, apologies. And that's one of the products we've done. The other one that we've also done is we have a lot of the loading ledgers when we deliver. So the distribution center did a project to bring back all the ledgers and recycle them back into a desk pad, which you can currently find in the store. So it's been, it's about a demonstration of the resource chain product that I talk about. And then recently, we've also just launched a kitchen front, which is entirely made from recycled PET bottles. So those are also our way to demonstrate that recycled products are not inferior. Recycled products can be as attractive, as good quality as what you see in the rest of the IKEA products that you can find. So having shared many little successes that we have, it is not without challenges and difficulty for sure. And in fact, we are just at the beginning of the long journey towards circular IKEA. What are some of the challenges and opportunity? As you can see, I think legislative framework is one of the #1 challenges we have. Today, if you look at many countries, when it comes to collecting back waste, when it comes to different legislation would have a different way of interpreting when it comes to collecting post-consumer stuff. Our colleagues in Japan, for example, they've tried, before they started doing used furniture sale, they actually ran into problem with authorities. They need to have the waste, they need to be classified as a waste management provider in order to do that. So those are the bits where it's challenges. The second one would be reverse logistic capability and infrastructure. One of the biggest challenge, one of the issues that we spend a lot of time discussing, whether to take back furniture or not. It's really about what's the solution, what's the infrastructure, where are we going to store it, how can we how can we know how much the customer is bringing back? How do we look at the reverse logistic? Would customer really go through the hassle, or et cetera and et cetera? It's really about the collection. Thirdly is the integration in the city planning. I think today, cities where we lived in today are planned again for linear economy. They've not been looked into, they've not been designed into become a circular city where you actually do have infrastructure that plans it well. I mean, what about living in a community where you do actually have an area designated for sharing furniture? Would that be perfect? I mean, in a housing, shared housing, where not everybody then needs to have garden chairs. The garden chairs can be shared among the entire block because different people would need different, the chairs at different time. And then the last one is, of course, coming back. What we're doing all this is really back. It's really for the consumer. So it's about some consumers need to get into the idea that recycled materials are not inferior. That's one of the points, and that when you buy a second-hand products, if it comes refurbished with good warranties and it is still as good as new. So those are the little bit where we need to look into. But again, with challenges come opportunity for research and areas to work into. I think there's a need to develop regulatory framework where circular economy gets a clearer framework to work in. I mean, we've seen the framework being developed in Singapore for Uber sharing economy. It's definitely a part of circular economy where you share, when you reduce the need for resources. Reverse logistic forecasting capability, looking at, in normal production, you definitely need a minimum quantity to have production going on. So in the shortfall where you don't collect back enough furniture, where do the shortfall comes from? So those are the various bit where we think it is important. Scheduling and storage. How does the reverse logistic look like? As good as forward logistic, we hope. Thirdly, it's coming back into planning with circularity in mind for cities and buildings. If the cities are planned to have certain activities or circular activities, then it will make things a lot easier to run certain schemes and products. And then finally, I think it's really to look at modeling of social behavioral studies. How do people react? What would really incentivize people to come into, to really bring back your products? So I think those are the really 4 big opportunities which can be worked on. And in conclusion, I hope that in the presentation itself, I've managed to share that why we are convinced that circular economy is essential if we really want to continue to realize the dreams and needs of the many people, at the same time keeping within the needs of what the planet can really sustain. With that, thank you very much. And we look forward to your question.
So I'm very privileged to be able to ask the first question as the moderator, but immediately after I'd like to open it to the audience because I really think the value of such a session is really to exchange ideas. So I encourage all of you to maybe think about what you'd like to ask the panel, or even if you don't have a question, whether you have some responses and some thoughts in your everyday life, in the positions that you do. How is the circular economy applicable to your life, and what do you wish to learn today? So I'd like to actually pose this question to the panel, and really, when we think about the circular economy, we're talking about systems change, right? We're talking about huge resource loops and huge cycles. And so if you are a policymaker and you are a business owner, or if you're just a citizen, where do you begin to actually apply these principles in your city? Does anybody want to have a first stab? Use the microphone. Thank you.
I could start, and I think that Dr. Lee said it quite rightly. She said, do you care? And I think that question was addressed at all of us. It's individuals who, in the end, power this system. So if you don't care within your own household, within your own decision making in your daily shopping, no matter how difficult it is, and no matter how the current system kind of forms obstacles in order to do that, if you don't care about asking these questions to yourself, then it's not going to happen.
Kees, would you like to add?
Well, I always say you have to start with yourself, as Bob said as well. And that's what we try to manage in our own family at home. Where a few years ago, yes, we were really very keen in saving electricity. And at a certain moment, it was even introduced to separate the waste that we have in our household. Then you get aware when you separate your waste on what is it and how the hell much plastic are we, the four of us, using, because that you are not aware of on beforehand. So I think that helps a lot. But I can tell you that me and my wife were all the time telling in the family that we were doing all of this because we were wanting to have circular economy and it was very sustainable. But our children said, well, you only do this because it is saving money, which was true as well, to be honest. And so that underlines again the statement that Dr. Lee made. Yes, in one way or another, it should be profitable as well. There should be a business case behind it, if it is on family level or on national level or on company level. Because if it is not a business case, then it is nice to introduce a system just for your own hobby. But hobbies do not last if there is not a real background behind it. And I think that would be the main lesson, to connect nice ideas to practical implementation. And in that sense, there was today for you a nice example, because probably you think that Bob and me already prepared our presentations towards each other, which is not true, because I prepared it last week and Bob last night in the plane. And we had no connection with IKEA on beforehand. And it's not a miracle, it is logic that the three stories, who is a bit more global, a bit more in content and a bit more company-wise, do fit to each other in a great sense, because circularity is not evidence, it's not gambling, it is logical thinking, and I think that we have presented.
Fantastic. Mien, would you like to add?
I think, first of all, it's conviction. I have to say that if I look at my own journey, when I did my PhD in 2003, that's like about 14 years ago, I think my PhD was like the first in closed loop. Then circular economy was not even formed. So I went into research of looking at how should closed loop product development look like. That was where I started my journey. And I think I'm really happy to see that from 14 years ago to today, it's like you don't even have to explain what circular economy is anymore today. When I was doing it, people was like, are you sure? You know, this is really far-fetched, like theoretical research is really research. It's just that conviction, and I think today, if you see that sustainability itself has kind of grown more mainstream, it's about the conviction to believe that it's part of our daily life. It's not just about protecting the environment. Of course, protecting the environment, it's kind of feel good to have, and at the end of the day, it's all come back to people ourselves, right? We protect the environment, but we protect the environment because we want to have a livable environment. So it's coming back to people ourselves. So it's about the conviction that you can make a difference, and the conviction that what you're doing is the right thing. So that, I think, is the first step. And then in whatever you do, whether as a private citizen, like Kees have mentioned, as a private citizen, you recycle as much as you can, you be mindful about your consumption, and then whether in whichever profession you're in whatever decision that you make, you keep that as one of the factors, even though the company is paying for it and not you. But think about if you can do that bit in part of your job, you're actually contributing to a greater cause, not just about your own job or your company. It's really to a greater cause. So that would be where I think we should start.
Thanks very much, Mien. I'd like to open the discussion to the floor now. Do we have anybody who would like to be the brave soul to offer the first question, first observation? Yes, can we have a mic to the gentleman? Could you identify yourself? Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Eric Hagen. I'm a student at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy. I wanted to challenge you a bit and ask you to talk about how circular economy is different from simply good waste management, including recycling and upcycling and all that. Thank you.
Does anybody want to take this first question?
Well, probably I can take that question first. I think good waste management simply refers to it's a bit more reactive. So like today in the store, what we do is we look at what are the waste that we generate. And then we look, based on the fraction, we go out and look for solution. We go out and we see that, if I have cooking oil, what's the best way to deal with cooking oil? What's the most sustainable and responsible way to do it? So it's very reactive. You don't plan for it. Whereas if you really think about circular economy, you've already have it right from the start. You think about, so give an example. For example, our modular sofa. We've already thought that when we design, it's modular. And if you really need a 3-seater today, tomorrow you buy a bigger house. You just wanted to add another seater, you add on. Or when you decide to downsize, you want to remove again, that sofa itself can be, if it's in good condition, can be resold on the market for other people. So it's about that well-thought, proactive in trying to manage and estimate how the waste should be managed versus a reactive one where you go and look for solution. And I think that makes a big difference because you plan in advance.
Anyone else wants to? Kees?
Yeah.
You're being so polite.
Well, maybe we wanted to contradict each other. Let's see. Let's see. I challenge you. Well, I have a very short and simple answer because it's already in the way you phrase it. You talk about waste management, and what we're talking about is resource system design, basically. So if you talk about waste management, you forget about the whole world that comes first. So that's the difference.
Kees, would you like to add?
Well, then we are repeating a bit, but you see in all the discussions, as we also have in Europe, that's not specific for Singapore, that we mix two discussions, and that is one, how do we change the linear economy in such a way that it gives less waste or less damage to the environment, which on itself is good, of course, but that is still modifying the present system. And we have in the meantime the belief that if we do so, we do not end up in a final solution. So the real discussion that we have to do is how to build a circular economy with no output, with no waste. And that is another way of thinking. And I see in all the discussions, also by myself, that you mix the two of them because it sounds like environment and it sounds like sustainable, but circular economy in its basic thinking is something else than linear economy, changing a little bit in the proper direction.
Oh, very well said. I think, okay, we have 2 hands there. Maybe we'll take both questions and then come back to the panel.
Okay. Your title, Circular Cities, and when you talk about Amsterdam, your great big city in Holland, you're talking about the circularity within that same city or beyond that city. Because in the context of Singapore, I grew up in Singapore. I'm a retired engineer and project manager. I'm always fascinated where our good stuff goes after the run-out date. Computers, for example. My computer supplier always get this question from me, hey, can I sell you my old computer? He says, nah, you're lucky if I don't charge you, you put it in my shop. Then you go off with a new computer. Because I cannot exact speed and capacity from my old computer. That's why I leave it in the shop with much regret and I buy a new computer, which is more expensive. Now, I'm very interested to know the last destination, the forwarding destination of my computer. He says, I collect 50 of these, I put them in a big crate, and we send it to Tuas, Jurong. And then the guy with the boat, he's an Indonesian. He collects it, and I sell it to him $1 per computer. I say, yes, but I want to know what happens to the computer. He says, well, there are some very smart people in Batam, Bintang. They spend 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and they make the computer work again. And it doesn't work so fast, but it suits them fine because they don't talk so fast, they don't think so fast, and it's good enough for them. So when you talk about a circular city, I think you have to embrace the surrounding cities around you where transportation is cheap, the traditional way is cheap and good, or old taxis, for instance. They end up in Sri Lanka. Maybe 10% of them are stolen, but they end up in Sri Lanka, Batam, Bintang, Johor Bahru, and these people create another 10 years life out of our disused products. So what we cast away as dirt, they treat it like gold, and they do not have PhDs.
Thank you very much for your question. Can we?
They don't have PhDs. They know how to scrape the last remaining value out of that product which Singaporeans condemn because the Ministry of Environment says this is pollutive, this is toxic, we got to keep our waters clean. Then say, sir, it costs you $10 million more, you know, if you throw away these because these people can derive benefit from this. Yes, but the quality of our water, the quality of our soil, the quality of our air and our total environment, the importance of it supersedes the recycling of this product.
Okay.
So it's
Thank
not
you very much, sir. I think we need to move on to our
Sorry?
second. I think we need to move on to our second.
Okay, thank you.
Question. Yeah, thank you so much for your
Thank you.
question. Thanks. Eugene at the back, over there.
Well, was there a question in there?
Whether you take in consideration the surrounding cities.
Yeah, but
let's take the second question.
I want to reply to that because it's a fair point. But I think we've done that. I think I tried to explain that there's various scale levels that we have to take into account exactly to address what you're saying.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Eugene from Zero Waste SG. It's a non-profit organization. So for city planners or for the government to implement a circular economy, it needs data, right? Data for material analysis, for waste analysis, or to understand the waste flow. So I'm curious to understand three things. One, of course, is the data collection. How does the institute or the government actually collects the data? And data across ministries, data even from companies, because some of this data can be quite sensitive. So are companies willing to give it to you? The second is data privacy, right? So from data about waste, you can actually tell a lot about the operations of a company. So that can be quite sensitive as well. And the third is the data quality, right? So it's not just enough to get the quantity of waste or material. You also need to know how clean is it contaminated, or how often is it being generated? So I'd like to hear your thoughts. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Eugene, for that question. So we have data collection, data privacy, and data quality, as well as the previous question about surrounding cities, which I think Bob already answered. Anybody wants to respond first? On the data, perhaps.
Well, I'm happy to respond. I don't know exactly if I give the proper answer, but I hope that I have shown or told that in the world people talk about big data as if this is the great solution to anything. And yes, we have many, many more data than we had 5 years ago, and even much more than we had 10 years ago. So that helps us to a little bit understand some of the interactions that we have in the total urban system, but no more than that. And collecting all these data is always, we have far too many data, so the number of data is not a problem. But the issue is how to combine the, let me say, intellectual data that will give you answers to the questions that you have. And do you have your questions, let me say, sharp enough defined in order to know what data you need to get the proper answers? And do you then really use the data that are okay? Do you take care of the privacy issue in data? And how do you deal with groups in your society that do not deliver data? Because if you would like to invest, or if you would like to make a policy for the city of Singapore or whatever city, You're also dealing with older people, dealing with people that have less education, dealing with minorities or with refugees or whoever kind of group that is not automatically delivering data. So people like we are here in the room, we all have our iPhones and our cell phones and our whatever, and those are used to collect data about you and me. And we walk in the regions where we have cameras and we are all watched, and well, we don't know about all these systems. But we have groups in our society that are not belonging to the group that directly or indirectly deliver data, and who are of very importance to what kind of policy do we have to formulate, and how does new systems, circularity systems or whatever, adapt to them. And therefore it was, I think, good in the presentation of Bob to show that yes, we are talking about the golden triangle, or other words about cooperation between government, know-how institutes and companies, which is fantastic. But if you do not in one way or another involve also just normal human beings in your system, then you will roll out top technology that will never connect to human behavior. So we have data that gives a lot of new insight, but that is not the type of miracle that will bring us a new future. We have to deal with them in a very intellectual way.
Thank you very much, Kees. Anybody else on the panel wants to respond?
Yeah, I agree with that. I just want to add a little bit, maybe it also answers part of your question. What you often hear when we talk about a construction sector, for instance, the construction demolition waste or construction materials, is an instrument like BIM, like Building Information Modeling. Huh? And that is really, the success comes from the data quality in it. And I think that's also partly what you mean. And you're absolutely right. We need a lot of data on that level. And to some extent, the data is not available. Like you say, we know maybe when something becomes available, but what is the quality of that part of the material? And so how can we use it? How do we give it a certain value? And how can we then pay that money for it, that price for it? So that is definitely true. And these are aspects of, for instance, a tool like BIM, but it could also be another tool, is that it's suboptimal, that there is a lot of data available, but it's distributed over many different people and different organizations. Now, how can we reach that, bring it together, and use it? In many cases, it's not possible. There will be gaps in data. There will be asymmetry in the data quality. You know, we know a lot about, for instance, when something becomes available, but we know nothing about in what state it becomes available. So yes, there is a lot of work to do, and that is something that is definitely part of the trajectory towards making this mature.
I think it is no different from any other research project that needs a lot of data, whether it's a health research project or anything else. So it's just based on different iteration. Even, I mean, in our example, do we know people really want to bring back their old furniture, for example? It's about us running an activity and then with the information coming back. And actually, since you're on the topic of data and circular economy, one of the best things for businesses like us is when we go into circular economy, you increase your touch point with your consumer. So from a market research analytic perspective, you actually has more touch point, you can get more data from the customer. Today, if it's only a linear economy, you have one transaction data. They come into the store, they buy, they leave. You know what they buy, you know how much they're willing to spend on certain products, but that's about it. When you have circular economy where they bring it back to you, whether it's on leasing, renting, or repairing, that's where you then have data to see that what are the products that people love to rent, what are the products that people would be willing to repair, and etc. So it's actually increasing the data points in order for you to make better decisions, whether it's based on a business or even a policy level, because when you accumulate many different businesses' data, that's where the government could actually make use of those data to make a fairly more informed policy. And I think that's actually quite important. And of course, you would then reiterate as you get more data, and you would improve the quality of data.
I have one remark, observation, and also a question to women and to Bob. The observation is more that I sort of got, after your talk, women, an observation about furniture as a service. Would that be a business model that IKEA is going to sort of look into? Because it sort of sounds like it, because you start to distribute it to them and it comes back. You get the data as well of when it comes back. Which brings me to the question about, actually the actual question about scale. You mentioned that it is difficult to predict how much you get back. Bob touched about the different scales. So I'm quite curious if there are some examples of like at what scale, what type of loop would work, if there's already insight into this, and if not, what it takes to get that insight.
Thank you. And can we take a question from the lady behind, and then we'll go back to the panel?
Yeah, my name is Giovanna. I work for a local company that deals in technology commercialization. And I'm interested in understanding your point of view of, the technology needs to move faster towards a circular economy. Because I was recently reading that actually plastic bottles are not the glass bottles, but for example, soap or detergents are very difficult to recycle because they are made of like 3-4 different types of plastics. So from the point of view of circular economy, if we could have one type of plastic that could be used for, the whole components, perhaps it would be easier. So from my point of view as technology translator, I would like to know from you, what do you see like a need of a new technology that could help speed up the movement towards circular economy in different areas, whatever it could be on water or waste recycling, etc. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any of you in the panel want to respond first?
Okay, I shall take the question of whether to provide furniture as a service. I think the idea of going to rent and leasing, it's where furniture as a service, whether or not to really change the entire IQ model into a service model, I can't answer that for now. Definitely service is part of the offering. It's what we're looking into, and it has to be part of the circular economy. One of the things that we try to look at, and when we move into circular IKEA, it's really the options and the offering. I think with every other businesses, what the commercial entities seek to look for is to have the widest option to meet the needs of the many different customers. There would be people who like to lease furniture as a services, who change year after year. There would also be people who like to own the product. So it's a bit of looking at how do we balance, how much do we push as a service and how much do we push as a product. And it fits the needs of different people.
Thank you very much. Gentlemen, would you like to respond?
Yeah, a short note on the question of Jair. We're doing a small project at AMS that's about circular components in the built environment. That's with the University of Delft. And it's with a couple of stakeholders in that supply chain. So it's with a housing corporation, and there is Akzo Nobel involved, and there is a constructor involved, and there is a engineering company involved that is particularly looking at surface installations. And what we want to do is look at the possibility of making circular models on a component level. So we have the housing corporation that then is like the launching customer, and they provide a kitchen, for instance, or a boiler as a service to the renter of the house. And that is just 1 year project. We're going to try that. It's a pilot. And then, of course, the next question is how do we go and look further downstream and upstream? Like if we have it on component level, what does it mean for the material level and the molecular level, for instance? But first things first, and we start with getting these people together, and they're all willing to think along. So that's, I think, a great start. So that's one. And then I want to answer the other lady's question. I think the answer should be that a product, whatever product it is, should be as simple as it can functionally and elegantly be. And that could apply to everything, basically. If we talk about building products, you have to make a building component or a product that is simple, that is not stuck together with glue, for instance. So it's stuck together in a way that you can take it apart again. And the best thing is if it's done with as little as possible in terms of types of materials. And in plastics, especially in plastic packaging, that's very well possible. It's just not often done because it's not the traditional way, the traditional line of thinking or part of the line of manufacturing. But some manufacturers already do that. And that is definitely the way to proceed because indeed it really helps the logistics and the separation of plastics. It's also about color, for instance. Not only the type of plastic, but also colors.
Thank you. Can I just add on to the question about component as well? I think one of the things when we talk about moving into circular economy, and one thing we haven't really touched a lot is innovation. One of the most important things when moving into a circular economy is about design innovation. Not only just the service offering innovation, but product innovation as well. You need to design the product to have a longer lifespan, to last over a few times used, and innovation in terms of the product to look at the properties that different plastics served. That's where it has to be one important point of it. For example, what we tried to do is to replace our metal. In some of the upcoming products, we're replacing the metal joints with just purely wood dowel wedged. So it's a pure wood product, and that will reduce the need of having to disassemble the metal when you want to disassemble the product. So those are different kind of product innovation that needs to come along as we move towards circular economy. And it's quite an important one, I would say.
My name is Ronald. I work for an innovation consultancy company here in Singapore. And by my English, you can hear I'm originally from Holland. So I understand a lot what is being said about recycling. This question is not about recycling or reuse of materials. This is more about, very quickly, this is a beautiful nation and a beautiful country and a beautiful room with a lot of like-minded people. But outside there is reality. And reality is we're very good in linear thinking here, and we're very good at having big themes like smart city. I think smart city and circular city and circular economy has overlap. But there's a danger that we go into technology solutions only or data solutions. My question is, for this to change and for this to change quickly, we need new infrastructure, we need new policies, we need especially a change in human behavior. So, here it is. How can this collaboration or this potential collaboration between Singapore and AMS accelerate that transformation?
Fantastic question, thank you.
Thank you very much.
We have a question from the back.
You talk about deep psychology, and it is quite linked to the question we had earlier. There are several ways to get this change arranged. First of all, we can organize a very big disaster, because that will bring the need of urgency. And we know that in the world that only after a big flood, governments are ready to invest in sea defense or those kind of things. So if there could come a big disaster, that would help in the thinking, but of course it's not the most easy way because you first have to suffer. The second way to come there is, like Bob said, yes, if you have a very nice product or if you have a very nice system that automatically fits to who you are and what you are willing to do, that would be the most smooth way, but you have to have very smart people to come to circular type of products that well fit to what we like. I mean, we were, as human beings, very quick in adapting cell phones, because that helped us in 2 years' time to come from the world where we lived to a crazy new world with a lot of more information, because that very well fitted to what we wanted. So that was quite a good way. Then, of course, if it is a real business case and there is money behind it, that also is quite a quick way of doing this. And there are some small examples, and let's hope these examples will grow in the coming years, because then we can accelerate. But if all of that is not there, then you come back to psychology. And then I only have the example in the world of about 10 years ago, when we changed from smoking is something, okay, you are a good guy when you smoke, to smoking, well, you are an ugly guy when you smoke. And it is very typical how in 3 to 4 years' time in the world this has completely changed. And I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not going to explain you how we should do that in circular economy, but it is the one example that I know of which something that we didn't like to stop with, we all stopped with, or at least many people, and now you have to smoke outside, and in hotel rooms you're not allowed to smoke, and in the office you're not allowed to smoke. That happened in 2-3 years' time. And that has to deal with how can you influence mass psychology. And if I would have the answer, I wouldn't sit here.
Thank you very much. You're obviously very passionate about the acceleration part of the equation. I'd just like to invite a gentleman for the last question, and then we'll wrap up.
I'm Mien from National Environment Agency. So I have 3 questions. First 2 questions relate to the title in the slides. I promise it'll be short. So the title is right, Improving Livability and Economic Climate in Amsterdam. So there's 2 keywords. One is livability and second is economic climate. So the first question is, you mentioned that circular economy must make economic sense. But we all know that resource prices are low right now, and it's difficult to make the business case right now. I'm not saying it's impossible. There are some cases where it makes business sense. Let's say, for example, recycling of batteries. Recycling of batteries is expensive. We all know that we should recover the metals from batteries, but it's expensive. So for situations like where it doesn't make economic sense, what should we do? So second thing is about livability. It's interesting to see how you link circular economy to livability. That's new to me. I'd like to hear how you all plan to do it. And that links to the last question is on targets and indicators. This question is directed to AMS and to IKEA on what kind of indicators do you have for circular economy in the aspect of livability and economic climate? Yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much for the questions. Wow, he managed to get quite a lot in there. So anybody on the panel wants to respond first? Ladies first.
Yeah. I think it's really about looking at how the product should actually be delivered. I mean, if you take an example of batteries, for example, you said that it's difficult to recycle, granted, then it's why we should actually look at rechargeable batteries. That would itself just reduce the amount of one-time use batteries. 500, one rechargeable battery on the average lasts about 500 to 1,000 recharge, depending on the grade of the batteries itself. So you bring down 500 to 1,000 times of the batteries that you look at. And then it's about also different technology innovation, because when we talk about circular economy, it's only about the process and the business model. It's not stopping the rest of the other research and the rest of the other development and innovation that's going on. It's about then what's the best thing to replace, how can battery be better made, for example. So there's many ways to solve that, I think. It's coming to a point where it makes economic sense, I think. Everyone strives towards that point. And the other point is, of course, when all else fail and there's a real need for government to legislate, then it's where you need to have you need to use a different economic mechanism to legislate or to look at it. The other thing about indicator, I would like to say, it's really about the value that you make out from per kilogram of material, for example. That's the most direct and straightforward indicator that any businesses can have in order to say that your business is moving towards you're dematerializing your businesses with resource usage. Then you're increasing your resource efficiency. A kg of metal can make you bring about X number of value. That's the best indicator you can have, and the straightforward that's people can understand. Of course, that's one dimension. There's a lot other different dimensions that you can measure to make it more complete. But I think I'll just stop here with one and let the other two
very much.
panels have their.
Bob, would you like to answer the...
I'm going to
link
answer
between
one of the questions.
livability and-
I'm not sure if it's the right answer, but I forgot two of the three questions. So I stick to one. I'm tired. But the question about the resources is a very valid one, because we see that the forces in reality are so that resource prices are not going up in some cases, but going down. We see that with oil, for instance, and all the forces behind it we can't control. So sometimes that's even perverse, and it's a big obstacle for a model like the circular economy. And the same goes for other material resources that we need. And we know from the past that I think there was once a bet between an economist and an ecologist, and it was about the ecologist said in 10 years' time we don't have these and these resources anymore because they're all going to become scarce. And the economist said, well, there's always a solution. There will always be a substitute, or there will be price fluctuations, and that will always solve itself. The market will solve itself. And the economist was right, because that's the life we live, that's the reality we live in. So that means that at the end of the day, we need like forces against that, both bottom up, like social driver, but also top down. So we definitely need some financial incentives or some tax measurements, tax interventions, in order to make certain resources or materials, give them the price that they deserve, and maybe make certain labor actions cheaper, so that you can put forward the idea of the notion of repairing something rather than buying a new product. So that requires interventions on multiple levels.
Thank you very much. Kees, would you like to respond?
Well, then I will cover question number 3. Then we have done all 3 of them. Although the third was not a question, and I can just underline what you said. The livability of cities is really an issue that we have to take care of, and circular economy can be helpful in that sense. But not only that, but if we know how big cities will be, if we know how big cities are at the moment, if we know that we work there, we live there, we grow up there, our children have to grow up there, have to be excited, have to be able to develop themselves, then it is a little bit silly to see that the main driver for city development is the return on investment in financial terms. And if we do that, also a type of return on investment in terms of livability or in terms of possibilities to develop and to be excited and to have a pleasant life or a comfortable life, that would be as of importance as just a financial issue. If this is answering your question, I don't know, but it's a true statement.